Today is Thanksgiving and tomorrow will be Native American Heritage Day, and we are doing a special edition of the easiest possible way to make an extract gluten-free beer. I'm holding my cell phone with my hand. I'm trying to minimize camera shake, but this was very last minute. I'm smoking a turkey today and I'm working on a beer recipe for quite some time, and I thought I would show you all the shortcuts that I'm going to take because I'm taking them all today. So to begin with, let's look at what we're going to be working with as far as sorghum, some gluten-free malt, as well as hops additions, yeast, and maltodextrin, etc. So here's today's setup. We're using a propane burner, a kettle, a grain bag, stirring spoon, thermometer, and for ingredients, we've got a half a pound of 18L biscuit rice malt, 240L caramel millet malt, some D180 sorghum syrup, some Centennial hops, M42 yeast from Mangrove Jack's, a Whirlflock tablet down there, and then some maltodextrin, a half a pound that I pre-mixed with cold water since it doesn't really like to dissolve in hot water all that much. And as always, I just have some enzymes laying around, so I'm going to use those. Let's start with the millet malt. I ground this in a coffee grinder. So again, I'm showing you all the shortcuts that I'm taking today. I'm not saying they're good shortcuts, but it's a shortcut. And I put a little bit of the millet malt in the coffee grinder. I gave it 2 short pulses, and as you can see, for a small batch of beer, not so terrible. And over on the 18L biscuit rice malt, I do 4 longer pulses, and again, cracks the malt pretty good. Like, not an ideal mill or grind, but it gets the job done for a half a pound or total of 1 pound of milled malt that we're just going to steep in the hot water for a little bit before we add the extracts and get into the boil and the hops additions and the rest. I've got my propane burner going, burning off all the stuff that's been accumulated on it while it's been in storage. I've got my brew kettle. I've got 2.5 gallons of water in there. This is a 2.5 gallon batch, and I'm only going to start my boil with 2.5 gallons. This is one of the cheats I was talking about. I'm not going to go for 2.5 gallons plus the 1.25 boil off volume. I'm just going to do the 2.5 gallons. It's going to boil off at approximately that 1.25 gallons per hour, and then I'm going to add cold water to achieve my post-boil volume to reach that pitchable level for the yeast. The reason I'm doing that is I can raise the temperature to a steeping temperature and then a boil much faster because I have less volume of water to work with. And then I'm going to drop that temperature to a pitchable temperature really fast because I'm just entering or introducing cold water to that wort, and I circumvent needing a wort chiller, and this is going to really cut down on the amount of time that we need to brew today. So with the heat going, I'm going to put the brew kettle on the heat source and make sure that that grain bag in there is not sitting on the bottom while we steep the grains. Looks like I got a little leaf in there already, so you know, it is what it is. And we just don't want to scorch that bag and cause all the grain to leak out into the water and what will be the wort here in a second. So it's been over 15 or 20 minutes. I got distracted putting the turkey in the smoker. My temperature's drifted up. Apparently I had the heat source on a little bit too high. But again, with this type of brewing process, I'm not overly worried about that. So I'm going to do part of this, and then I'm going to have to cut out because I'm doing this with one hand. So I'm going to remove my little clip, and normally you would want to take the time to rinse out the grain. You want to just get as much out of that as possible, get your best bang for the buck, also get the most benefit for the beer. Just running a little bit of sparge water through it at 168 degrees. And I'm not going to do that today because I'm doing this with one hand. So I'm just going to get as much out of there as possible. And I also have to get my little false bottom that I put in there out. Oh, there it is. Oh, had it for a second. All right, apparently I'm going to pause the video for this. Oh, there it goes. That is probably ridiculously hot, but I have a pretty high threshold for hot things at this point. Next, we're going to, oh, I forgot to turn up my heat source. I'm going to get that going again. And we're going to add the extracts. I'm going to add both the sorghum syrup and I'm going to add the D140. Make sure that it doesn't scorch on the bottom, so you want to stir, which is why I can't do this with one hand. I'm going to need the other one to stir, make sure I don't scorch the syrups on the bottom of the brew kettle. And then once it comes up to a boil temperature, we're going to start our boil. This is also a 45-minute boil, so we're taking a little even more of a shortcut because the hops addition just allows this to be a shorter boil. So I'm going to stop the video here for a second, get the extract going, and we will come back in a second. As you can see, the volume of wort has decreased pretty significantly. I went ahead and let this boil for about 45 minutes to correct for the volume of sorghum syrup and D180 that I put into the wort. And now I'm going to start the 45-minute hops addition. So beginning with the first hops addition, generally if you're really close to the top of the kettle, you want to start by just putting a few pellets in or a little bit of your whole hops. That's because the acids in the hops will generally start a chemical reaction, and that could easily result in a boil over. I've got plenty of space, so I'm just going to dump that all in, and I'm going to start the 45-minute timer. The next hops addition is at 30 minutes, so I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes and add the next addition of hops. We're ready for the next hops addition, which is at 30 minutes, and then the last hops addition is at flame out. However, at 15 minutes, I'm going to add the Whirlflock tablet and I'm going to add the maltodextrin. This would also be the time to add yeast nutrients if you had it. And of all the things that I have in my brewing supplies at home, I am out of yeast nutrients. So we're just going to do without it today. So here goes the next hops addition, and we will be back in 15. We now have 15 minutes left in the boil, and I'm going to first add the Whirlflock tablet, and I'm going to add the maltodextrin that I've already combined with a little bit of liquid, and give that a stir. And in 15 minutes, we'll add our last hops addition and then move to the primary fermentation. So we're at our final hops addition and flame out. What I'm going to be doing next, I will have to turn the camera off for, because again, I'm doing this with one hand and my tripod's at the business. So I have our fermentation bucket. I've got some cold water in there already. This is one of the cheats that we were talking about. No wort chiller needed. We're going to do the final hops addition and turn off the flame, and then I'm going to transfer the wort into the bucket. I'll then move this inside and top that off to the pre-fermentation volume that I want, which in this case is going to be pretty minimal extra volume because I don't anticipate a whole lot of trub. Things are going to settle out of the beer, but it's only an ounce of hops and not a whole lot of sediment in this wort. So we're inside now. I transferred the wort into the bucket with some cold water, and then I topped it off with more cold water to get to my pre-fermentation volume. This is a 2.5 gallon batch, so I went up to 2 3/4 of a gallon, and that should give me my target volume of approximately 2.5 gallons. I've got a whisk that I sanitized before the boil ended, and I'm going to aerate the wort and pitch the yeast and put the lid and airlock on. In the event that you're a little bit off the optimal temperature to pitch the yeast, you can do a quick ice bath. This is just really to get the wort within pitchable range. You're not doing a full range from boil down to pitchable temperatures. So the cold water took care of most of it, if not all of it, and you can just do a quick ice bath to get to the range that you can pitch the yeast. So we'll follow up with that in just one moment. So we've completed our ice bath. I'm going to pitch the yeast. You can use a half a packet for this size of a recipe. This yeast happens to be expired, which really doesn't mean expired, it just means it is slightly denatured. It's been properly stored. I'll put the top on, and again I'm still doing this with one hand, so I'll snap the top on in a second and set the airlock, and we're ready to move it into closet, garage, whatever, wherever you do your fermentation. So that is the simplest way you can possibly brew gluten-free beer with all the shortcuts. We're not going to put the recipe in the comments just yet because this is a recipe in progress, and I think this is about their third time brewing it. We want to make sure we get it right, and then it will be up on our website, and hopefully it will be a recipe kit. Happy Turkey Day.